we have a poor understanding of the full sum of the industrial capacity that exists in Canada and what can be brought to bear by companies who do add the expertise in those very high-end machining and manufacturing. I think we should not be scared of exploring some of those opportunities. There was a time that we did it in Canada. We build hull sections for the LA class submarines. We build torpedo tubes for a lot of our allied fleets.
This is the Expert Series podcast from the CDAI Institute, Canada's premier defense and security think tank. I'm Josh Malm, and it's Friday, October 10th, 2025.
The process of procuring submarines is a major decision for the Canadian Navy, for the Canadian Forces, and for the Canadian government. I'm pleased that our new approach has been more efficient. We've shortened the time. We moved more quickly to those two options. And what the Vice Admiral said, apparently in your quotation, which is my understanding, is that both of these options work. Both of these are the Korean option and the German-Norwegian option, if I can put it that way. Both of them fulfill the requirements, the very high requirements for the Canadian Navy. There's nothing I see that would suggest that we would have a mixed fleet in submarines. You just get too many efficiencies and economies.
Canada has shortlisted two international shipbuilders, Germany's TKMS and South Korea's Hanwha Ocean, for its Canadian Patrol Submarine Project, which aims to replace the Royal Canadian Navy's aging Victoria-class submarines. The program plans to acquire up to 12 conventionally powered submarines with under-ice capability and extended endurance, with the first delivery targeted for the mid-2030s. Both bids are now being evaluated for technical performance, delivery timelines, and potential economic benefits to Canadian industry. A final selection could be made as early as late 2025 or early 2026, with contract signing to follow and full fleet delivery projected into the 2040s. Today on the pod, CDAI board members Luc Cassivi and Bob Davidson joined us once again to discuss the downselection, its implications, and future timelines of the submarine replacement project, as well as what the new fleet means for Canadian maritime and defense strategy. This is the Expert Series.
Could you go over what the current state of Canada's submarine fleet looks like, and how has the process of selecting new suppliers proceeded, as well as any key developments that may have shaped the process so far?
Right. Well, it's actually the current state of the fleet that adds a lot of the urgency to moving forward on this project. You know, there's a bit of a storied history with the Victoria class, largely, in my view, attributable to the way we introduced them into service and the initial limitations, particularly on the financial end, that didn't really set the Navy up for early success. And so they've had to work very hard to get the best value out of the Victoria class, and they're getting old now. And I mean, they were a used submarine when we bought them, and they're getting old, and it's getting more of a challenge. And so we urgently need to replace them. If we could do it earlier than the current timeline that the Navy has specified, which is 2035, there's a lot of value to that, I think, for the Navy, and probably money to be saved as it relates to how you have to continue to spend money on the Victoria class to keep them running. So with not all of the boats available, I think we're down to between 1 and 2 at the moment. The challenge is maintaining the crew levels and the experience levels of the people. Long pole in the tent in submarine operations is almost always skilled submariners, and there's a lot of work that needs to be done to maintain that pool. And so there's an urgency to move forward. And so all of that urgency is largely driving a program that isn't exactly following the norm when it comes to procurement process. It's already an accelerated process. I mean, I identified this as a likelihood more than a year ago. I said this was not going to be your average project when I was talking to folks, and we're certainly seeing that now with an accelerated program. So the Navy has done the down select in order to further move towards being able to get into contract negotiation with a single supplier, I think, at the earliest possible opportunity. And so this next phase having down selected to just 2 countries, this next phase will give them the last information that they need to down select further to 1 and then to enter into negotiations.
Just to speak a bit more about the current process, can you possibly elaborate on what the main factors were that determined which submarines made it onto Canada's shortlist?
Well, there were a number of high-level requirements that the Navy identified early in order to help them downsize or down select, as well as, of course, to identify the capability that they were really after. Urgency was really at the top of that list. So the requirement to deliver no later than 2035 with maintenance facilities and training systems in order that they can then get to operational capability well before the end of the next decade. They needed nations that could deliver the fleet size that we're looking for. So they had to have capacity to do the building that would meet to our fleet size requirements. The boats themselves had to have the right levels of endurance and persistence to stay, both to get to where we want to deploy them, and also so that they can stay there and conduct sustained operations in that area. Lethality, also very important in terms of what kind of weapons systems, weapons packages are on the boats, and how they can both achieve whatever mission they're required to do, be it anti-ship or anti-submarine, or indeed to perhaps do other kinds of strike capabilities, including special operations forces. Obviously, we have a 3-ocean approach to this project, and so the Arctic piece is also important. We ought to be able to operate in both oceans, and indeed not only in the cold waters of the Arctic, but in the warm waters of the Caribbean and elsewhere. We want a minimum crew size, of course, because, as I mentioned, the long pole of the tent is the people. You want to really minimize the number of people you need for the long-term sustainment of the capability and for the through-life costs as well. And so that's important. Survivability is critically important. A key element of that is the stealth of the boat. How hard is it going to be to detect? And so those are additional factors. And then there's really a strategic aspect to this as well. The interoperability that we will have with our allies, and then the strategic value we can get with whichever country wins that can help us deliver on training aspects, on tactical development going forward, perhaps a whole range of issues in those areas. There's other lower level capabilities, equally important though, in areas like ability to do the intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance piece, the ability to set up the infrastructure that we're going to need ashore, jetties, etc., plus training facilities. Deliver training at the start of the program. That first crews would certainly need to be trained overseas or at the OEM or in conjunction with allies that are operating that submarine. And so that piece is important. And then we'll need to be able to bring that training capability back and put it on both our east and west coasts so that we can deliver high quality operational and technical training to our sailors. And then in the long term, of course, we also have the issue of we want to work with a partner where we know that the boat can be upgraded, bring in new technologies as we go forward, essentially the growth potential of the capability. So those are the whole areas that were being looked at, and those were the factors upon which the Navy and other departments were able to do the down selection.
Now, could we dive a bit more into how requirements such as Arctic operations and long endurance specifically shape the down selection process? I'm curious as to any further elaboration you can bring to this area specifically.
Sure. Well, let's just start from the assumption that we're going to operate the submarines from the same places that we currently operate them on the 2 coasts. So, say from Victoria and from Halifax. we need to be able to get to whatever areas we want to patrol. Of course, it's easy to do the near Pacific and near Atlantic close to those bases, but you also need to be able to get further afield to deployed operations. And quite frankly, the Arctic piece establishes the range and persistence requirements just in itself. We tend to think of it as being in our own waters, but it's a substantial deployment to get to the Arctic. It's quicker from the East Coast, truthfully, because you can come out of Halifax and basically you're going straight up and into the Arctic, whereas from the Pacific, to get into the Canadian archipelago, you're going to have to go all the way around Alaska, and that actually adds a substantial distance. But we need to be able to get the submarine from our port of departure up to the operational area. It's going to take anywhere from 3 to 4 weeks, depending upon which base you're departing from. Then you want to be able to stay and persist in that location for at least another 3 weeks to conduct an operation there and to patrol and achieve what you're trying to achieve in terms of sovereignty or whatever additional capabilities you're trying to prove. And then you need to be able to do the transit back to the home port. And so you look at those kinds of distances, and it establishes the roughly 7,000 nautical mile round trip you need. And then on top of that, you need to add the additional endurance to do the 3-week patrol that you're there for. So that kind of sets the requirement for range and persistence. Also driven, of course, by crew size, because you've got issues like food and water, etc., that need to be managed on board the platform as well. You've got the maritime pollution regulations that apply to the Arctic that need to be applied to the submarine to the extent that it can be done. And then you also have the challenge of the ice environment, and how do you operate so that you both avoid ice in those areas, to find the best areas to return to the surface when you need to, as well as to have the ability to actually operate in the near under ice areas to achieve the mission. So that kind of establishes what's needed for the Arctic.
Shifting our focus now to the implications of this process for the Canadian defense industry, to what extent would you say Canada weighed industrial benefits and domestic content when narrowing the field?
Well, it's usually important, and Canadians expect it too, right? If you're going to put a large amount of money into a capability, the taxpayer's looking for a return, not just for the purchase of the capability, so that our sailors are best equipped to do the job we want them to do. They also want as much return on investment as they can get for that expenditure. And so that's always been a critically important factor. The two countries that are in the down selection are both able to deliver offsets. We established pretty early on that Canada, obviously, as a G7 nation, we've obviously got the capability to build submarines if we wanted to. We could get there. We don't have it today. And so the challenge is, if we wanted to build the capability in the country to build them here, we would have enormously extended the timeline to get to that first submarine. And so the urgency of the replacement drives the issue of a military off-the-shelf procurement. So buying a fixed design that somebody else is already operating, that we can operate with as few changes as possible, so that we don't have any risks to the schedule. This is what drives the requirement in many ways. And then, naturally, we want maximum offsets. And so both countries have to be able to deliver those offsets in one way or another. There are lots of ways to achieve that. Some of the offsets can be directly in the marine industry they could be in other defense industries or in other areas of capability more broadly, like the energy or transportation sectors. There's a broad range of areas where of those countries or through and in strategic partnership with those countries and with the OEMs, we can assure that Canada is going to get offsets or dollars spent in Canada. And then the other aspect that we want is obviously to generate a certain amount of that business into Indigenous businesses within the country. And so I believe that's going to be a key factor when the next stage of the assessment is done as well.
Looking now to international implications, how did alliance politics and relationships with supplier countries influence the shortlist? And specifically, I'm hoping you can go a bit further into how this new decision-making process may affect interoperability with the U.S. and the U.S.-Canada defense partnership in the short and long term.
Well, let's deal with the U.S. piece to start with. The U.S. doesn't build these electric submarines. They basically struggle, I would say, to meet their own capacity requirements at the moment. Something that they've had a challenge with for some time. They're not producing that many of the nuclear submarines on an annual basis. And so, that capacity and the desire to compete in this kind of a project certainly isn't there. So the U.S. was never really, never considered as a factor in this, and they never tried to compete, of course. But the interoperability with the U.S. Remains a critical factor for Canada. So we still want a submarine that we would be able to operate in conjunction with our closest ally south of the border. We would want to be able to ensure that, for example, the communication suite is entirely interoperable with our ally and other allies. So that certainly is a factor. But I don't think in this case it really is a driving factor because both countries, I believe, both South Korea and Germany say they can deliver in those areas. So why South Korea and Germany? Well, let's start with South Korea. From a strategic perspective, we know the government introduced its Asia-Pacific strategy not that long ago. There's a desire to do more in the Pacific. Hanwha has clearly leaned forward with lots of announcements in relation to this and with an unsolicited proposal as well to massively expand the areas of potential cooperation, including land systems and others. So they're obviously offering enough of a strategic approach to meet the minimum requirements that the government's looking for. Turning to Germany, of course, it's not just Germany, it's Germany and Norway. Two countries are building that submarine together. You have industry from both countries fully engaged in it. And it's under the umbrella of NATO as well. So there are a lot of advantages, clearly, in an approach that leans in that direction. And even further, there's the Rearm Europe endeavor that's ongoing at the moment in response to what's going on in Eastern Europe, of course. But so the European countries are actively endeavoring to increase their defense spending and deliver on capability quickly. And a partnership into that environment opens doors for us to contribute perhaps more robustly to the Rearm Europe piece, which is, of course, very beneficial to Canadian industry. So arguably, there may be a lot of potential for even more indirect benefits with some kind of a partnership with our European allies in this way. And of course, the other advantage, of course, is, two countries versus one. So, we would be in the domain of, for example, training and getting our sailors out to sea in the submarine that might the early stages in the submarine operated by one of those allies. The more the merrier, if you will. So we want that kind of capability. And of course, both countries would have to deliver language or training in at least in English. And then we would expect, I think we should expect that the government will also want, of course, all of the training packages, et cetera, to be available in the French language too, for obvious reasons.
For Canada, what role more broadly did sustainment and long-term maintenance commitments play in the evaluation?
Well, it's still early. Nobody's actually defined the in-service support concept. So Canada hasn't fully said exactly what it wants yet. They want, it's more generic, if you will. It's a view that can you do in-service support, and then how might you do that? So it's a critical factor, the in-service support, but we have enormous amount of capability in this country for in-service support. We got a lot of great companies across the country that can help us. We've got shipyards such as Seaspan and Irving on the two coasts. We've got manufacturing capabilities in areas like, so for example, in Quebec, Marmon, a very high-tech company. On the training side, we've got lots of companies that can do that. For example, CDAI, they're involved in training for the new ships that are coming down the line, so they could actively participate. So the ability to deliver in-service support, which also is delivering hugely on the offset side across the country, is certainly there. And I think both suppliers have the ability to establish relationships. And the next phase and the final decision may well come down to who's got the best concept or who's going to have the best relationships that will achieve those offsets going forward. Again, we don't know exactly how that evaluation will take place, but clearly it's going to be a very important factor as we move forward.
As we wrap up, I'm hoping we can spend some time discussing the linkages of this process to current developments in Canada's procurement capacity. Now, given Canada's history of troubled procurements, what safeguards are in place to keep this process on track?
Well, the new initiative, the new Defense Procurement Agency that the government is setting up certainly offers the potential to dramatically reduce some of the paperwork and bureaucracy that has slowed down the process. I think it's going to take them a little bit of time to come to an understanding of how they want those processes to go forward. So I'm not sure that the new agency will have a lot of impact on the submarine project in the short term, because it's already moving at pace and already moving essentially not on a normal procurement process, but on an accelerated procurement process. So I don't think there'll be a dramatic change to the way this project moves forward because of that agency, but I think we will want to see how that moves forward, particularly as it pertains to not necessarily to the procurement of the platform itself, but to the other elements of the program, like the in-service support, which will require further negotiation. We may well see for the submarine project a contract that is split into a number of different areas rather than having one full contract. We might see, for example, a contract for the platform itself and a second contract for in-service support, and perhaps a third contract on the training side. And breaking the contract up in that kind of a way can allow the D&D to move forward rapidly on the platform, while they take a little bit more time to look at the proposals in relation to in-service support and training, et cetera. So I think we're going to see a lot of work done here. In the end, the schedule is king here. There is the urgency. I mean, the urgency isn't just operational. Clearly, there's a political urgency as well, with the announcement that we're getting to 2% this year, but more broadly, the 3.5% to 5% defense spending that the Prime Minister has announced will also drive a need to spend dollars. And so maintaining the schedule will be king, one of the top priorities. And then anything that affects that will have to be very carefully managed. So risk can arise in the procurement process. It can arise in a desire to make any minor change. Even minor changes to the boat can introduce risk because there are design implications. Anything that might affect the speed at which these submarines can be delivered will be avoided. And so that's the process I think that you'll see moving forward. So all those high-level requirements that I mentioned up front will still be in the next phase. I think it's important that I think the Navy will largely, the various departments or perhaps the new agency, if they take this over, will want to look at all the full range of requirements, high-level requirements, and they'll still, even though the Navy has said that both submarines meet their minimum requirement, I think they're still going to want to take a hard look at how that requirement is being met in areas where there is perhaps a capability edge, a technological edge, survivability or lethality edge that one boat has over another. I think all of those factors still come in. And then, of course, how quickly the boats can be delivered, what the cost versus the capability balance will be, I think is equally important. And the offsets and how the in-service support training will be delivered across the country. All of these things will be looked at. So you can see this is a hugely complex process that we're all trying to move forward through quickly. And it's going to be a challenge to get where we want to get to. I believe we really, if we want to hit that latest date of 2035, we need to be in contract pretty darn quick. If not by the end of next year, then early the following year, we would need at least the platform element or the OEM element of the contract done and moving forward. But there's a lot of urgency here and a lot of work to be done, and it's going to be both a challenging but also a very exciting time.
Luc, thanks so much for coming on the podcast and to talk submarines today.
Pleasure.
I'm wondering if you can start us off in this discussion by answering or addressing kind of three things. What's the current state of the Canadian submarine fleet? How is the process of selecting new suppliers proceeded? And from there, maybe what are some of the key developments that have shaped the process so far from your perspective?
Thanks, Josh, for the question. I think very, very simply, I think the state of the current fleet remains challenged. It is an aged fleet that requires a high level of maintenance. So we're still proceeding with a low level of availability, although it has improved a little bit over the last little while. It's not what we need, what Canada needs to force generate and to protect itself, really. So the urgency to move on to a replacement fleet is as germane now, if not more, than it was at the beginning of the exploration of what was possible. And so we're seeing really in that effort what we can truly call by Canadian standard a very accelerated timeline. The Navy did a lot of work initially with the project team to do different processes in parallel to be able to accelerate the early stages to get to what we call get through the option analysis and provide options to government. I think they've done stellar work there and have shaved a few years off the process by doing that. The announcement in August of the downselect to two candidates, two manufacturers, after the RFI process that took place in fall is again quite accelerated. We didn't. I think every OEM was surprised that a decision was reached that quickly, and that in itself will shave more time off the process. So I think we're, really setting the tone with this project of it is possible to accelerate if the client, which is the government of Canada, is willing to make decisions early, accept risk. And for those who are left on the side, a bit of relief that they're not going to be spending millions and millions of dollars to submit proposals to be rejected, right? So they can move on to other projects of interest to them and put their energy on those things. So I think there's also a blessing for industry. Not everybody will agree with that, but that is what it is. I think one of the key developments that we should note is what's changed since the last time we had discussions about this project is the national context. Okay, we've had an election, we have trade issues with partners. We're trying to reinforce Canadian industry in a way that we haven't done before, particularly when we're going to spend a fair increased amount of money on defense investments and procurement going forward. And I think that marks a different tone than when we started on this project. And so it'll be very interesting moving forward to see what opportunities may or may not exist for Canadian industry through this. And I'm not, when I say that, I'm not talking about bringing Canadian changes to a design that exists already, but how Canada can contribute to the supply chains and to the manufacturing process to develop our own expertise, to bring new job in Canada, and also to make the long-term sustainment of the platform a lot easier because we'll have in-house expertise.
I do believe a few weeks ago, the commander of the Navy, Admiral Topshee, said that there could feasibly be two suppliers for our submarines, potentially Hanwha and TKMS. I believe that idea was refuted by the Prime Minister shortly thereafter. There's some discussion and debate around it as well. I'm wondering what the rationale there would be, and if we're still likely to, from your perspective, go with one supplier, and maybe what would the complications or benefits be of having more than one?
I think the Navy's position was that the commander articulated in large term is whatever the government wants to have a strategic relationship with partners that could drive different solution, the Navy will do it. Will support. They're not, and I think that's really what the intent was behind, because there was a lot of folks in the bubble that is Ottawa that was saying, "Hey, would two fix a submarine be possible?" The reality for the submarine service is that that'd be very difficult to manage. So I welcome the statement that we're aiming for one supplier, because at the end of the day, where this will be difficult, there'll be more money, it'll be different supply chains, it would be different training requirements, different maintenance requirements. So from a management of these fleets, it becomes a bit of a nightmare, but it's on the back of people that we do it. You lose flexibility in the management of your fleet personnel because there's two different qualification system for two submarines that not all the valves are at the same place. Not so the folks have to relearn if they're gonna go from one to another. Where emergency procedures, where all the valve line up. The principles are the same, but the physicality around the platform is different, and that becomes an issue when you come about interchangeability of people inside our fleet, and also efficiencies of scale when it comes to supply chains and the like. So I think there was a lot of people were reacting, getting ready for maybe a consideration. Now we know that it's not the lead of the client lead. The Prime Minister has been quite clear in his answers. So I think there's a lot of folks who feel comfortable with that because of, again, the challenges it would bring to the enterprise to manage that platform long term.
As you probably saw a couple of days ago, the German Armament State Secretary was speaking to CBC News, and I'm paraphrasing, but he he said there's nothing stopping Canada from building half or maybe more of the dozen submarines it intends to buy from the Navy. I'm wondering if you can weigh in here and maybe talk a little bit about Canada's innate capacity right now to build domestically.
I may be a little controversial, but then that's it. I tend to agree. Listen, I think we have a poor understanding of the full sum of the industrial capacity that exists in Canada and what can be brought to bear by companies who do have the expertise in those very high-end machining and manufacturing capability. We have folks we have companies that do work in nuclear, in space, in all kinds of industries that are that have highest, same if not higher level of certification in welding and in manufacturing. And I think we in this day and age, or in this change of context nationally, where we want to use our investments in defense and in other areas to really boost Canadian industry and economic development in this country. I think we should not be scared of exploring some of those opportunities. There was a time that we did it in Canada. We build hull sections for the LA class submarines. We build torpedo tubes for a lot of our allied fleets. And I'm sure that and I know there are manufacturers who can deliver at that standard. So my sense, or what I would say, is let industry partner with the people that they see that can contribute. The moment non-industry people try to meddle in industrial relations, we kind of we kind of create a problem. I think I would hope that the government of Canada would encourage the two OEMs to consider inclusion of Canadian company within their supply chain, and that they would invest time to discover these companies, and these companies will come and knocking at the door if there's opportunities for them, and I know they have already. And have an open mind to what could be, and for us not to be scared of that. If a company like TKMS was manufactured more submarines than we have owned in our lifetime, judge a supplier in Canada to be of the quality or that they need to supplement their supply chain, that's important to consider, because if it's them, they're going from building 12 submarines to building 24. They're going to need more capacity because we all want them quickly, because all of our fleets are aging and the threat is real. So let's, I guess my point is, let's encourage this to happen, and let's not get in the way of industry doing what they do best, which is partnering to their interest and to ensure that they can deliver.
Oh, this last half of this year here has been it's been quite the year for various defense announcements in Canada. And again, as you'll know, Luc, last week we had the announcement of a defense investment agency, which aims to modernize Canada's defense procurement by centralizing expertise, cutting red tape, and streamlining decisions. If we could connect this back to the submarine acquisition and the Victoria-class replacement, do you think this new agency will have any impact on the procurement of these new submarines or the processes at all?
Well, I think, that's a very good question first, and I think we're all very anxious, not anxious in a negative way, but we're curious to learn how the investment agency will be structured and will operate, and I think we need to be patient to get there. I think they're doing that work now. The announcements and the framework that came as a starting point, and I think there'll be a lot of work on this. I think they will get involved with this project, obviously, because of the size of it and the scale of it from a money perspective, and we'll learn through that relationship how much more streamlining can be done on these pieces. I mentioned there's already been some, and I think we've shown, or Government of Canada has shown through its agencies, that it's capable of acting a lot more quickly. So it'll be interesting to see in other areas if that will take place. But I think it's still too early to see. I think the initial work has been great. Let's get the team put together. As they are, get folks in, analyze processes, establish where there can be some saving, understanding where the delays naturally happen, and say, okay, why do they happen there? Can we, how do we circumvent those delays in the process to make sure that we manage risk intelligently? And you can't manage all risk away, but if we're gonna truly transition from a traditionally restrictive peacetime procurement process to the enemy's at the gate, you need to start thinking procuring for war. You need to drastically change how you think about risk around this contract and these types of contracts. And the proof will be in the pudding. But I think there's a great opportunity here to show that it can be done.
Like I mentioned just a moment ago, Canada has made a lot of defense announcements in the past few months, pledges to get to 2% by end of the fiscal year, now reaching 5%. There's been countless announcements by the Prime Minister about defense investments and investments in critical areas. So perhaps one might argue that maybe Canada is taking real stock of the threat environment and maybe potentially putting its money where its mouth is. We'll see. But I'm wondering, again, if Canada is preparing for a more challenging global security environment, which it seems it might be doing, could you explain where submarines fit into that?
Listen, there's a number of areas where submarines come in handy. First, it's the ultimate, at this stage, it's still the ultimate deterrence element. Okay, the submarine's presence is the hardest thing to detect, and it brings you closer to undetected to the area where you want to have an impact. Okay, so that it's for intelligence gathering, that it's for any other activity in preparation for a particular operation, it's an incredible asset that way. It's a large ocean, but there's a lot of submarines there, and not a lot of those submarines are necessarily our friend. And Theater ASW is an important role that submarines can truly affect there. And let's not forget that in all of the global conflicts that we have, our oceans and our waterways are, and they still are today, the eye to the economy. That's how the world supply itself is to ships going from point A to point B with the goods that are required, and submarines are key to the protection of key elements of these routes to ensure that one, you can continue to supply for conflict or for war, to use that expression, but also that you can keep the necessary element of the economy running in a safe way. So there's a lot of roles there that are important. And, we've seen through traditional, non-traditional activities and the likes, how, through small episodes, how those routes can get quickly disrupted, sometimes through benign elements, like, a ship blocking the canal, but it could be, it could be, something much more dramatic that requires more persistent and more aggressive kind of capabilities to do so. So, there's a wide range of reason why you need submarine in your arsenal, and you don't control your waters without submarines. If you can't control the three dimensions of your waterways, you're not really exercising sovereignty. And in the context of Canada, when you look at the very large and important complex of underwater infrastructure that exists, that are critical to the world operating, banking system and the likes, through underwater cable, data cables and the likes that go through our waters, the capability to, as it's becoming more defined of what some of our European friends would call seabed warfare, and bring effect to the seabed in a covert way is going to become more and more important based on what we've seen happening in Europe through the Ukraine conflicts, for example. So, I think they continue to have a place. They will continue to have a place. They will evolve. They may, in the next generation, be complemented by large fleet of uncrewed capabilities as well as crewed submarines. We'll watch as that technology evolve and those things happen. But surely there is, as we saw in the early stage of this project, an intent with this class of submarines to operate with those capabilities too, and expand the range and the effect that the platform will have. Long answer to your question, but
no, thanks for putting your international relations and geopolitics hat on for that question, Luc. Just to close out the podcast, so obviously with the down selection, we're down to Hanwha and TKMS. There's been speculation that there could even be a choice made before the end of the year, by year's end. Luc, as this process continues, what would you say are some of the things to look for, and what do you anticipate next in this process?
Well, let's talk about the process first, and noting that I don't have any official insight into the process. This is based on what I've heard and what kind of makes sense based on my professional judgment. So I believe conversations with, there's a dance that needs to go through, right? So yes, you're done selected. Now you need to prepare proposals, and I imagine they would be in the desire to accelerate the process. What will be requested are kind of very high level proposals that builds on the information that was provided during the RFI process. And that's more specific, more specific data when it comes to delivery timeline, capacity, costing, and what else is in there. I think so there's the element of purely building the submarine and getting the shiny object in the playground so you can use it. That's one piece. That's not where the real challenge is. The real challenge is you got to play with that thing for 40 years. And so all of these other elements that will be crucial to the success of the program, as we've learned from the Victoria class, in-service support, being a key element of that. So that's why, I'm a firm proponent of if we can get Canadian industry and others in the supply chain and tap into a very large element of, even participate in an international market of supplier for submarines to some of these, to either of these OEMs. It's a plus with your expertise, and then sustaining ourselves over that 40 years of ownership, so to speak, it becomes a little easier. But there's also, let's face it, like the real client is the government of Canada, and what does the government of Canada want or is looking at from a country to country, government to government relationship at a strategic level, and where they see the strength of partnership as it relates to where we go from here, right? So I think those will be very complex, high-level proposals. I don't think there'll be a decision by the end of this calendar year. I think that probably the high-level proposal may be available to the government by the end of this calendar year, and they'll need to do some analysis and make some decisions. So, reality is, I think, a decision by the end of fiscal would be miraculous, but it's a legitimate kind of target to put out there based on how willing folks have been to make decisions and move forward. I think there's other pieces to consider there. We talked about geopolitics a little bit earlier, and I think that's where the government to government piece will be important. We're a member of NATO, so where do we see ourselves in the alliance in relationship to what we purchase? We have high reliance on the United States when it comes to intelligence, acoustic intelligence, EW intelligence, and things of that nature. So, where are they comfortable with that? And what kind of systems for that to that information to reside? And is that an issue with any of these suppliers? That's something to consider. The other piece is the strength of the supply chain and the strength of manufacturers. And, arguably the geopolitical situation of the supplying country when it comes to what future event could happen and what does that mean to the capacity of your OEM to supply. You have the war in Ukraine. You have developing challenges in that area, and so there's a rearming of Europe going at the same time, and those are all important activities, and does that have an impact, positive or negative, on the relationship we may want to have there? You have China and a threat to Taiwan, and what does that mean to the rest of the region? What play North Korea could do, and what does that mean in the ability of Hanwha to deliver? I mean, those are all high level strategic factors to consider as to when you're trying to decide who you're going to have that long-term strategic relationship with, right? And I'm sure people are thinking about it. I'm just saying that because let's not avoid the conversation. I think it's important to have it and to be important in our mind. And I think then we enter in contract negotiations, and how long that takes, I'm not 100% sure. But if you get into a contract position by the end of next year, after 9 months of negotiation following a decision at the end of fiscal, that's pretty phenomenal from a historical timeline, and then the commitment to the build can start, right? And so you're that much closer to having a platform available for the start of the phase out of the first of the Victoria class.
Luc, great to speak with you again. Always good to chat with you, and I appreciate you rolling with the punches because I did stray from my prepared questions list. So thank you very much, and hope you have a great Thanksgiving weekend as well. And we always enjoy having you on the podcast. So we appreciate you providing your insights and expertise.
Well, thanks very much. It was great to be with you. And for all who are listening from the Naval family, to everybody, happy Thanksgiving. But for all who are listening from the Navy family, please have Earl Corn and his families in your mind this morning, as Earl passed away recently, but his memorial service will be on the weekend.
Thanks so much.
Great sailor, a great leader, a great mentor. Just what the best he was one of the best of the country, and he'll be sorely missed.
Well, I think the community appreciates you spotlighting him like that, and I echo your words as well. So thank you very much, Luc, and we look forward to having you on again in the future. And that's all for today's episode. If you want to learn more about the CDA Institute, follow us on social media, visit our website at cdainstitute.ca, or subscribe to our newsletter for the latest updates on Canadian defense and international security. If you have comments or feedback about what you heard in today's edition, email Josh at cdainstitute.ca. I'm Josh Malm. Until next time.